one thing I found crazy was that the cartels are operating in small-town America because, I don't know, when you think drugs, you kind of think
cities,
New York, L.A., San Francisco, Chicago, and yeah, there's small, pilly towns, but you don't think drug cartel. You think like, oh, there's a rotten doctor and somebody's trucking the pills over there. You don't think cartels operating in small-town America. That's kind of extra scary.
Absolutely. You know, I've been covering the cartel for many years now. And I sort of wanted to do a story about cartel presence in the U.S. And once we started researching it, I realized that actually the story should be should be about all the things that we don't know about cartel presence in the U.S., including the fact that they're in small-town America. So one of our first shoots for that episode was in Georgia, and I don't know if you saw the episode.
I did.
But,
I watched all of season 5.
You did? Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was in Georgia, and it was about, we started with sort of a murder investigation of this woman who was tortured, and they cut off her fingers and then eventually killed her, and she was killed by the cartel, and it was in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. And then we sort of followed the investigation and realized that they're everywhere, and particularly like to operate in small-town America.
Because law enforcement has one sheriff for the whole county, and what's he going to do?
Yes, exactly. Less law enforcement, easier to hide the drugs and have their distribution networks.
I suppose that's true, right? Because if you're doing a drug buy at a farmhouse, who is, even if the sheriff is right there at the house, all right, you guys, put your hands in the air while I wait 3 hours for the FBI to show up.
Right, and they're all armed with like AK-47s and AR-15s.
Right,
exactly.
And they've got their helicopter on standby, and yours is in Washington, D.C., if they understand why you're calling.
That's
like, who gave you authority? No, I followed the cartel here. Like, okay, I suggest you leave.
Yeah. You know what was so interesting about that story is that we, in order to get access to the cartel in the U.S., we actually had to go down to Mexico and gain permission and have them say yes. And so we spent quite some time in Sinaloa and met a lieutenant and all these other people involved in the cartel. And eventually it was the lieutenant who said, okay, we'll give you, initially it was another member of the cartel that had given us access to an operation in Washington State. And then there was some sort of arrests, and that fell through. And so then it moved to the lieutenant. Basically, when you go down to Mexico, you have to meet several people, particularly if you're trying to get access to something in the United States, and hoping that something will happen. So we met all these people, and there was all these possible options, but then nothing worked out. And then the last one we met was this lieutenant, and he, you could see in the episode, he's like all like jittery, and it was like one of the craziest scenes meeting him. But we had like 15 minutes with him, and then the Marines were coming, and they all got nervous and wanted to leave. But the last minute, I asked him, can we get access to the operation, and to your operation in the United States? Because a lot of these groups have people that work for them in the U.S. Obviously, the U.S. is the end goals where they're sending their drugs. And so eventually he said, okay, we've got you, and it was all set up, and we were supposed to meet them in Minnesota. And so we traveled to Minnesota, and we're like, we're not a huge team, but we are 6 people, and we've got lots of gear, and we have to and I'm shooting, 10 episodes every year, a year.
Like 2 SUVs.
It's like you have to pack your we get there. And then we waited and waited for days, and the guy never showed up. And then finally we get a call, and he's like, actually, that was a what do you call it?
Like a trick?
A trick, yeah.
A decoy.
A decoy, thank you. That was a decoy, and we are in another state that you're not allowed to disclose, but come and meet us here. So then we had to do like a company move to this next place and just hope that they'd be there.
Right. I wonder, do you think they were watching you in that place the whole time to see if you were meeting with the cops? Like, they didn't show up.
Yeah, we were told that sometimes happens when we film in Sinaloa. That happens all the time, where they tell us one place and then they don't show up, or we know that they have eyes on the ground checking us out immediately.
Jeez.
And sometimes it's not so much about us journalists, is because they don't know, even if they trust us, they don't know if we're being followed, particularly me and the kind of work that I do.
I was wondering, if the FBI is following you, you're just leading them to all sorts of criminals, or Interpol or something. It's like, what does she do? She meets with all the people we can't find, and they readily meet up with her for some reason, and then film.
What I usually say is that it's not as if law enforcement doesn't know where these people are. Like, it's not as if the whole of Mexican authorities don't know where the Sinaloa
That's a good
cartel
point.
is. It's more that it's law enforcement. They have to catch them in the act. There has to be evidence. There has to be a case built, and not so much in the case of Sinaloa, but here in the United States at least. So I don't think it's in their interest to follow me. But I do get often asked by law enforcement agencies in the U.S. to go and speak at conferences about what I've learned. And that's interesting.
That's got to be an interesting balance, right? Because it would be cool to do that, but on the other hand, when you want to film season 6, they're like, so you went and spoke at the FBI 4 times last year. Why are we trusting you with our lieutenant in a secret stash house full of drugs?
One of the things I tell always is that, even though we're very, very careful with protecting our sources. So we even bring masks with us.
Okay, I wondered about the masks because you're going in and you're filming these guys packing, I don't know, pink cocaine or something like that, and they're wearing like a skull mask, and I'm like, are these guys picking this out? I was like, nah, the crew must pick these out because they're not like, yeah, hold on, we got to go to Walmart, Mariana, and get some masks, and we want cool ones. They didn't have any in the local Target, so we got to go to another. It's like, no, you got to bring them. However, there was one guy who was like like a cook in the United States, and he had a ski mask on that said, "Yes, Daddy," and I'm like, who bought that?
What was this one?
It was the one about
MDMA
the trank dope.
The trank
and there's
dope.
a guy with a ski mask that says "Yes, Daddy."
Okay, so that was his.
That had to be his.
That was his mask.
Yeah, okay.
So a lot of the times we do bring disguises, but a lot of the time, because there are situations in which they say yes, they agree to be filmed, and then we get there and they don't have disguises, and then they decide not to do it.
Right.
So we started bringing our own stuff. We even bring long sleeve T-shirts to disguise tattoos and glasses and gloves and all of it. But a lot of times people are prepared, and so they know there's a film crew coming, and they come up with these amazing, some of the best masks we've had have been people who have picked their own. We had one guy, season 1, where we filmed an episode on scams in Jamaica. It was one of my favorite episodes still. I think it was the second episode we filmed for Trafficked. And we get there and we're interviewing all these incredible, super colorful, Jamaicans are amazing. If you've never been to Jamaica, they're just really, the way they talk and they're...
this the one where you were under the bridge and he's like, if I was thinking about stealing your camera.
Your shit. Yeah. Victor, his name's Victor.
Yeah. I remember that.
He was thinking of stealing your shit, but he'd realized I was nice. You're good people, Mariana, so I'm not going to steal your shit. So instead, I'm going to tell you about how the game works, which is scams. But one of the guys that we interviewed, this scammer, was a guy, he showed up with a Trump mask because he wanted to talk about capitalism and how it's all about everybody's stealing anyway. So
it's a sensitive topic now. Yeah, NatGeo could. Do you think NatGeo would be like, we don't want a president mask?
Oh well, they aired it. They aired it back then, and he wasn't. Was it in 2000? We filmed in 2000. Yeah, he was the president. We filmed in 2019. Yeah, it was his first term. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd be like, why do you have to pick that one? I don't want to deal with this from the CEO.
Yeah, true, but we didn't get in trouble for it.
Good for you.
So we aired it.
How many cartels are there? Do we know?
I think it's estimated it's around 200 cartels right now operating in Mexico. These are just Mexican cartels.
That's way more than I thought. Because I would have said like 5. I don't know.
I mean, 5 big ones. You know the big ones, CJNG and Sinaloa and Jalisco. I mean, Jalisco, CJNG. But there's like a lot more smaller groups. We did a story once many years ago for NatGeo, not for Traffic, but before, about Los Tequileros, which was a group in Guerrero State that was in charge of like the production of heroin at the time there. And Los Tequileros are, they love their tequila.
Oh gosh. There's one that's called, it has something to do with their haircuts. What is it? They're Los Viagras, you know those guys?
Oh my God.
And they're called Viagras because their hair sticks straight up with this gel. And I'm thinking like, you guys, the branding is so bizarre.
Yeah, not just of their own organizations, because in many cases they are organizations, but also of the drugs themselves. I mean, they realized they started shipping fentanyl to the United States several years ago, and we did a story about fentanyl when it was just starting. So nobody in the U.S. still knew what fentanyl was, but because I had done a story on OxyContin and then heroin, the progression from OxyContin into heroin, all my sources on the ground started telling me, hey, there's this new drug hitting the streets called fentanyl. It's a pharmaceutical drug, but they're starting to exploit the pharmaceutical drug itself instead of using it to get them high instead of in a medical treatment centers. And the cartel suddenly has its hands on this. So we went down to Mexico and interviewed a guy from the Sinaloa cartel. He had a brick of heroin, and it was mixed with fentanyl. It was when it was still all heroin mixed with just a little bit of fentanyl, and then it reversed. But he was telling us, hey, this just recently happened where the Sinaloa cartel decided we were going to get in on this business, and they had hired a Colombian chemist to come there, and they'd paid him, I think, like $40,000 or $50,000 for the Colombian chemist to teach them how to make fentanyl.
Wow.
And it was the biggest bet, and that's why the Sinaloa cartel grew so much. They were the first on the fentanyl game.
That's crazy.
And initially, they were just shipping white powder to the U.S. or hidden in packages and whatnot. But then they realized, wait, they realized, and then dealers and distributors in the U.S. realized there's a way that we can make ours, different from the other. So they started mixing it with pink coloring dye or blue, and pressing it into pills with the M30 to make it look real, like it's a pharmaceutical. And they're very smart. That's the thing about these groups. They're all very, very entrepreneurial.
There's the guy by the way, that journalist helping you is brave. That guy,
Miguel Angel Vega.
Yeah,
he's one of my very good friends. He's a very close friend.
First of all, he seems really cool.
Yeah, he's super
he's
cool.
got like a suave factor. Yeah, and he's like chill, and he's like, they would kill us if they found this. And I'm like, you're not nervous about that? Yeah. So he's very good for TV, but also he's really brave because my friend wrote a book about journalists, narco journalists, and there's a couple listeners of the show that are anonymous narco journalists where they post things under a fake name because they will get killed doing this in Mexico.
Yeah, that's right.
So it's very interesting because I was like, hey, who's this person who's on my Instagram? And I was like, what do you do? And she's like, well, I cover cartels, but I can't use my name or face or anything because they murder people like that all the time. And this guy's like, I'm just going to show up on NatGeo, show my face and everything.
Yeah, he's incredible. Brave. And one of his best friends was killed by the cartel, actually, in Sinaloa. So this is a guy, my friend Miguel Angel Vega. He's from Sinaloa. He started as a print reporter. His story is freaking fascinating. He wrote a book called El Fixer, and we optioned the book, my company. As soon as he started writing the book, I was like, I'm optioning your book because his story is phenomenal. But essentially, he became kind of a journalist because he wanted to be he wanted to be a filmmaker, like a Hollywood filmmaker. And he was working on his film, and suddenly he lost all his funding. So it had been shot, but he wasn't able to pay for the editor to get it together. And he needed to figure out how to finish this. So he had worked as a journalist before and went back to the newspaper, which is one of the biggest newspapers in Sinaloa, and started working and was there when suddenly an American crew calls and says they're coming to do a story about the increase in violence in Mexico. This was several years ago. And he was like, how much do you guys pay? Whoa, I want to be that. And pretended like he had connections to the cartel and was going to give them access, but had zero connections to the cartel. And then starts building connections. His sister-in-law did the hair for one of the cartel boss's wives. And, an old high school friend was now involved in one of the distributions, all this stuff. And he started trying to figure out. And he became the number one person to this day. Any international news organization or American that wants to go to Mexico and do a story about the cartel, they will go through Miguel, and he has the access.
Can you intro me to this guy? Because my listeners right now are like, you are obviously getting this guy on the podcast, right?
Yeah, so you should. He's amazing.
I would love
Absolutely.
to do that.
Yeah,
I would love to do that. A lot of your interviews are done. There's armed guards around you. Well, you always do a great job of showing. There's always a guy in the corner doing this, right?
We're good. Our camera team is really good at showing the danger.
Yeah, there's some guy who's like, this is amazing, and he's like, or like filming like this because he doesn't want to be like, hey man, can you turn to the side when you show your automatic weapon that is fully loaded? And I wonder if how do you stay focused when there's guys who are itchy and possibly on drugs and waiting for the Marines to start shooting through the windows, and you're thinking like, okay, focus on the guy in front of me because I have 10 minutes or 0 minutes. I don't even know.
I think we're all afraid of different things, right? That is not a situation that makes me nervous or afraid. I'm afraid of other shit.
Running out of time?
I'm afraid of not getting that interview, for example.
That's what I would be thinking
right,
about.
I'm afraid of big predators like sharks and tigers and shit like that.
Well, you dove with the shark.
I know, and I was scared shitless.
Oh, okay, because I thought, she's such a calm diver. I would never do that.
Give me 100 guys with masks and AK-47s, and I will take them all. Okay. But one shark in the ocean, and I'm dead.
Was it you who touched it, or was that
I touched it.
I wouldn't. Forget it.
I did.
I'm not doing that.
I was super nervous, but then once you're in the water, it's actually less nerve-wracking. So I'm usually very focused on the interview. I have this whole thing where a lot of times I bring cigarette. We always have cigarettes in the production because a lot of times you have to have meetings before the cameras are even turned on, and you have to get that person comfortable. uncomfortable, and a lot of times they don't want to be on camera, right? So having cigarettes for me, offering people cigarettes or beer, or
it's very Portuguese of you.
Very Portuguese, but it's a way that we're connecting, right? I'm not above you. I'm not different from you. I show them photos of my son and my family on my phone. I ask them about their families, and it's a way that we're immediately connecting. And I do that even if they say yes, then we sit across from each other. And even before we turn on the cameras, I'm asking questions that I know are just like, what's your favorite food? Things that we all share in common. And that's my way of humanizing them and of them to understand that I'm there as a human being. And then I never have a list of questions in front of me.
I noticed
so that is number one.
Yeah.
And I've worked with directors who like write all these questions that they want me to hit. And I hate that because it makes me, then once I read that list of questions, it makes me think that I have to memorize them. And then I'm distracted during the interview because I'm thinking, okay, I have to go back to the question that is on the list.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I don't want to break eyesight with them because I want them to feel that this is not work for me, that this is actual human curiosity.
Yeah, curiosity, yeah. I could do that for 15 minutes, maybe even half an hour.
Yeah.
I don't think I could do it for 2 hours. Like, I have a list of things here that otherwise I would forget to cover,
And so even on the podcast, sometimes I have some things that I want to hit, but I never look down at questions, or rarely.
Yeah, I just check and go like, okay, we already talked about this, this, and this. And then it's like,
everybody has
Shark
their
Tank.
different, this is where you
This is my crutch, my iPad crutch. Yeah, I thought that it's interesting these guys will even meet you in the first place. Why do you think they do that, even though it increases they're not getting paid, it increases their risk? This guy's like, oh, the Marines know you're here, so they know we're here. It's like he could die giving you 15 minutes of masked information that does him no good.
Right. So 3 main reasons. Number one is ego. People want to boast about what they do. I'll never forget interviewing this guy who he's the best money counterfeiter in the world. He's a guy in Peru, and he makes these $100 bills and $50 bills that look exactly like the real thing. He is called the finisher. So he adds sort of the crunch to the bill, and it makes it look used, and the smell and the touch. It's exactly as if it's a real bill, but it's not. And this guy, for example, he does this. He was a driver during the day, and at night this is what he does. And his family doesn't even know he does it.
Why be a driver during the day when you're printing $100 bills?
Because he needs to have a job. A lot of times it's to actually launder the money. Yeah, and so that his family
10 grand a day
thinks
driving.
that he has a real job, right?
I see.
So I don't think he works like 8 hours as a driver. He works for a few hours. He tells the family that he's a driver. He actually has some stories of driving because he's doing it during the day. And he can launder the money, and it's not going to be a big question mark. Where is he getting all this money from? But the money that he was making counterfeiting, it wasn't for him, actually. He was selling that because if you get caught, he doesn't want to, and none of us wants to end up in prison. So what he would do is that he's making the fake money, and he would sell them a fake money to the boss that would then distribute it around the world. Right. Anyway, but his story was that when I started interviewing him, his eyes kind of lit up. He's so excited. He was like, "Oh my God, somebody actually wants to know about this thing that I'm amazing at. I'm like the Cristiano Ronaldo of fake bills, and nobody's ever wanted to know." Yeah. And behind him,
Department of Treasury would love to talk to him as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm going to be able. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Should have introduced him. So I think it's ego and wanting to boast about it. In terms of the cartel, a lot of times it's boasting, wanting to talk about it. Then it's impunity in places like Sinaloa, where people just don't really see a downside. There's so much corruption. Even if the police knows where I am, there's no chance that I'll get caught.
Probably could have done it without masks, and it would have been.
And sometimes we actually have to convince people to do it with masks because they don't want to wear sunglasses, or they just want to wear this mask, or just cover the mouth, and we're insistent on this is silly because if you get in trouble, then we'll get in trouble too, and our whole team gets in trouble, including people like Miguel Angel Vega who lives in Mexico.
Trouble for interviewing them?
Because if they're found out, if they found out because of a story that we did, they're going to say that maybe we ratted them out or we gave information to the police. Right?
You're not getting in legal trouble for it. You're getting in
trouble with the cartel, which is much worse.
Yeah, way worse.
And so we're very careful with protecting identities. And then let me just tell you the third reason why I think people talk to us. And it's this very human characteristic we all share of wanting to be understood, right? We all want others to understand understand why we make mistakes, why we do it, why we are who we are, why, and that's the opportunity that I give everyone. I tell everyone I approach, look, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here because I really want to understand why you do what you do, because I think that's ultimately much more interesting than just. And that doesn't mean condoning what they do.
Of course. The only time I've seen you almost maybe show that you were judging someone is that pastor who hated gay people in Kenya.
God,
he was such a piece of shit, this guy.
Yeah, and it's not my first time interviewing him. Yeah, it's interviewed him before. Yeah.
You were like right on the edge of, I could tell you wanted to just bite his face off because he's a terrible person.
We actually got into a big fight. You saw a little bit of it. It got worse.
I bet.
Yeah, it was a whole, I mean, he's sitting down in front of me telling me how, the LGBTQ community, everyone is disgusting and they're eating the poo-poo. This is what he says
he's like
people do is they eat the poo-poo.
I saw that and I was like, this man is mentally ill and an aggressive piece of crap. And it's just, and he does it all under the guise of, I'm not religious, but like, I like to, it's, but it's like, it's really gross and simplistic. And this guy's a terrible, and he's increasing the harm for these like kids who are getting shot or beat up because they're gay in Africa. It's infuriating. Even if you're not, it's not an issue that I feel like it's not something that personally affects me, but you can't help but be like, why are you making things worse for people that already have it hard? Why are you doing that?
Right, and I think actually it personally affects us all, right? Because it's right now it's that group, but it could one day be
Africa,
Portuguese people or podcasters and part of that story was actually to show how it's a lot of the legislation being passed here that is influencing what's happening in Africa. Yeah. So it actually impacts all of us. But yeah, that was a really hard time. I also interviewed an assassin here. We did an episode on assassins in LA. Most of the episode was filmed in South Africa, which has the highest number of assassinations and some of the highest numbers in the world. But we started that episode interviewing an assassin in LA, and that was a really interesting one because
that's not season 5.
That was season 4.
Okay, I gotta rewatch that.
Yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah. So did you lose your cool during that one? Is that why you bring it up?
Yeah, because the whole point of the show is also to humanize people behind the mask and try to understand why they do what they do. And in that case, as soon as we arrived, we met him downtown at night. I connected with him through another contact that I have here in the U.S., a guy that I really like that has given me access to a lot of underworlds in the U.S. And so as we're driving to meet the assassin, my contact tells me, hey, by the way, you have to be careful with this guy because I think he might be kind of like bipolar because he will be happy one moment and then really angry the next. I was like, dude, where are you taking me to, right? Anyway, we get out of the car. This guy is jittery already. And he's like, okay, so what's up? What do you guys want to ask? And I was like, okay, hi, my name is Mariana. Yeah. Here's the crew. I'm introducing everyone. He's like, just heads up. He takes out his gun from his belt and he's like, do you see this here? If the police shows up, if this is a fucking setup, you're all dead. Great. And so the whole interview, I'm thinking, if by chance the police shows up, not because I'm here, but if a police car drives by, he's going to think it's because of us. So I'm trying to make it quick, right? So I'm asking questions. Okay, are you really an assassin? What do you mean? How much do you get paid? All that stuff. And then I wanted to ask, my last question was about trying to humanize him. So he says he only kills men, not women or children. And I asked him, do you have children? And what I was trying to get at is that if he was killed, his children would suffer. So even if you're just killing men, the suffering is all around you. And as soon as I asked that, he jumped to very angry, and he was like, "What the f*** are you asking me? Emotional question. I'm not going to get emotional here. What are you trying to do? I'm not good with this shit." And he wanted to cut the interview. So that was.
That dude is damaged.
It was a hard interview. Yes.
Yikes. Are you ever worried about the safety of your crew? Because I would imagine, even though I am married and have kids, I would probably be thinking, if we die here, I'm going to feel really bad in the afterlife that I got her, him, and him all killed, and they're all younger than me, and they had their whole lives ahead of them. Like, it's my fault we're here getting buried in the desert.
Yeah.
Damn it.
It's the biggest thing on my mind constantly, and all our safety. I mean, we go through enormous lengths to make sure that we're minimizing the risk. We have hostile environment training. We consult security companies. We don't travel with security the majority of time because it's just, I'm trying to get people to trust me. And if I show up with security, it means that I don't trust them. Why should they trust me, right? But then there's, even no matter how much planning you put in place, it's like Mike Tyson says, plans are great until you get punched in the face. Yeah. There's always stuff that's going to go wrong. And so we had that situation situation in Niger where I got stuck in a coup. That was also season 4. We made that part of the story because we were there to do a story about illegal gold mining. And then there was a military coup. We got stuck, and there was an incoming war. We were in one of the most dangerous places on earth with terrorist groups all around us. And the whole time I'm thinking, I'm here. I'm stuck with 6 other guys. It was all men, but they all have families. All their wives and moms were calling my production company because I'm also the executive producer and owner of the company, and asking what was happening and how can we get them back to safety. So it was the worst time of my life. I wasn't able to sleep. It was just nerve-wracking.
How long were you stuck there?
10 days. 10 worst days of my life.
That is a long time to be stuck in a military coup.
Yeah.
When you expected to be home a week or two, whatever, prior to that. Like,
That's
we're going to be in and out in 48 hours. No.
That's the only reason NatGeo allowed us to go, because it is one of the most dangerous places on earth. You've got Boko Haram and ISIS and Al-Qaeda all operating there. You've got kidnapping squads. And you're not, as an American, showing up with no security is not a good idea. So we'd been giving the military, the local military, or the government have been gave us military escort that would follow us wherever we went. So we went out into the mines. We drove for 8 hours and slept out in the desert, in the open desert, so that we could film inside the mines and interview the miners that are illegally mining for gold that is actually paying for the terrorist
the Islamists
groups.
Yeah. Wow.
Or funding part of the terrorist groups. And so when we came back from sleeping overnight in the desert, we came back to this town called Agadez. And when we arrived, we found out that there had been a coup, and immediately they removed the military security from us. So we were left with no protection in a rundown hotel with, again, no protection around us.
Yikes.
And with and no way out. So the borders were closed, the airspace was closed, and suddenly they started evacuating people from all over the world, but from the capital. And we were a 3-day drive to the capital, and we couldn't even go because it's too dangerous. So we were literally trapped in one of the most dangerous corners of the world.
Oof.
And it was scary as shit.
That is awful.
Yeah.
That's not fun. No, you're not stuck at a Four Seasons in the capital with a military surrounding it and like, oh, we'll get out of here soon. It's like, no, we're at a Motel 6 equivalent
it was
in the middle of nowhere.
It was actually a building that was a rundown sort of house type thing that was built by Muammar Gaddafi when he'd visited in the 80s. And they'd left that building there and turned it into basically a rundown hotel. There was like 1 drop of water was the shower, and it was it was very hot. And we ate couscous morning, night, and day.
Yeah, oh gosh, I couldn't. I'm not sure what's worse, the couscous or the threat of being kidnapped by ISIS.
Yeah, but I have to say, beautiful part of the world, so beautiful. The desert and the landscape, so beautiful, and incredible people that were essential to sort of figuring out how to get us out of there safely.
Yeah, how did you get out of there?
Incredible.
How did that happen?
It was so I had a ticking time. We had a couple of ticking time clocks. One was the incoming war. So the other countries in Africa that are part of the what's it called? The group, the African group of nations that I cannot remember the name right now, but they were threatening to invade Niger and depose the military leaders. And then the Wagner group in Russia were saying that if they did that, they would come in and defend the military coup leaders. And so it was kind of like a proxy war happening in front of our eyes, right? And so that was one of the ticking time bombs happening. And the other one was I had promised my son, it had been his birthday while I was there, and he finished his camp. It's a performing arts camp in New York, and every year my husband and I have a tradition where we go and pick him up. We see the play that he puts up, and it's a very important day for all of us. And I spent so much of my time on the road that I live with the guilt of spending so much time away from him, right? So this is a day that we never change. We always go. No matter what happens, we go and see his performance. It's an important day for him and for us. And it's my favorite day of the year, quite frankly. I love it. And that was happening. So we were going to go to Niger, be there for like 4 days, get out, and come back to LA, and then fly to New York and do the performing arts camp. And then we get stuck. And so I'm seeing the days go by and realizing, shit, I'm not going to be able to make it.
Right.
And I'm the worst mother in the world. Plus, I have this incredible team around me whose families are suffering right now.
And we might all die.
And we might all be kidnapped and die. So all of that was going through my head. And I went, one of the first days of the coup, I went to the airport because I wanted to see if there was any planes flying in or out, even though I knew that the airspace was closed. And I met this amazing guy. He was the manager of the airport. His name was Kader. And I asked Kader, I'm asking, are there planes going in? Do you think there's anything coming out? He's like, nothing. Not until we get the permission from the government. It can take months until the airspace opens. You guys are going to be stuck here for a long time. And I'm on the verge of tears at this moment. And I ask him, do you have kids by chance? And he picks up his phone and shows me photos of his kids. He's like, yeah. And I showed him a photo of my son on the phone. I was like, I told him it's his birthday next week. It was too complicated to explain, like the
right, yeah. So he's in this performing arts camp,
yeah.
like, bro, cut to the chase.
So, yeah, it's his birthday, and I need to be there for his birthday, and it's next Friday. And this was like Saturday or Sunday, and it's next Friday. And so please, Kader, if you find out if there's any planes coming in or out, please let us know because I need to get my team out of here and I need to get to my son's birthday. Anyway, we start trying to figure out that's unlikely that anything will happen, and we start contacting. We have an evacuation company that we work with. We pay a lot of money to get us out in situations like this. Well, we filmed us calling the evacuation company, and they are completely useless. There's a moment where they say, we have no plan. And I'm asking, do you have a plan? Oh, we don't have plans. It's ridiculous. You should watch this episode.
Like,
it's
why do I pay you $10,000 a month for this insurance?
It's insane.
Have you looked at our death and dismemberment policy?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So they failed us. So then it was a team in LA led by the executive producers on Trafficked, but also my husband, who's also an executive producer on Trafficked, who's in LA, and they're like, we're going to have to figure this out because nobody's helping us. Like, nobody can figure out a way to get these guys safely. So they started contacting different evacuation companies and different groups out there that could possibly do this. And they found a group, amazing people, who had 2 pilots who were crazy enough to fly with a private jet in the middle of the night. And they told us they're going to land, they're going to be there for 20 minutes. You've got 20 minutes to get on the plane. And the plane is coming from Ibiza, and it was a G5 plane. If people don't know, it's like the most luxurious of private jets.
It's like DJ Tiesto uses it to get to European gigs.
Dude, it was insane. It was the biggest whiplash of my life. So basically, after a week of eating couscous and no AC and, a drip of water, and suddenly, and so this is happening. So we're following the plane as it's coming from Ibiza. And the plane's coming here, 20 minutes on the ground, and then it's going to Dubai, and it's going to drop us off in Dubai, and in Dubai we're going to get our commercial planes to go back home.
Yeah.
And the plane, it's a long story, but it's worth it, I promise.
No, it's so far so good. I'm just imagining the pilot going, let me see the runway. And they're like, it's that soccer field down there.
It wasn't a big runway, and they were very brave because it was an active sort of military, potentially at war country.
Yeah.
And you see, we still have printed out, my partner in Trafficked, Jeff Plunkett, gave me a map when I came back. He printed out the map of what the plane radar map looked like at the time. And you can see it's this whole, you couldn't fly through
it's a red
Niger.
box.
Niger is a pretty big country in the middle of Africa, and it's a red box. And then there's one plane crossing, and it's our plane that's coming. And basically they figured out. So they're coming. We're seeing it coming from Ibiza. We are as nervous as you can imagine as we can be. We arrive at the airport. It was like 5 a.m. The sun was just starting to come up. And we are met by a group of military. They're all there, and they don't want us to leave. They start creating problems. They start saying that we don't have the proper documentation. And then back and forth. And Kader, my friend, the manager of the airport, is also there. And suddenly, Kader sort of takes the reins and starts literally yelling at the military, which is very risky for him too.
Yeah.
And trying to convince them that the papers are in order, that we need to leave, and basically doing us an enormous favor and trying to help us. And eventually they decide, okay, everybody can leave except for, we had a fixer, the producer, local producer, who is actually from Mali, from the neighboring country, who is with us and helping us. And they said, everybody can leave except for the Malian guy. Oof. And that's when I called my husband and I said, hey, Darren, I'm so sorry. Everybody's going, but I'm staying as sort of the head VP of the show.
The guy there.
I'm leaving. I'm sending the team with the gear, everything, but I'm staying with this guy. And I'm in tears. I'm thinking, I get emotional still talking about this, but for me, it was the failure of me as a mother to making this decision, and it was really, really hard. Thinking, I'm not going to be there. Most important day of the year for my son, and again, I'm failing him. And I'm having all these gigantic guilt problems. And yet again, Kader comes and is yelling at him. And then my husband is on the phone with me and says, hey, I'm looking at the flight report, and I think the pilots are Portuguese. Their names are Portuguese. I was like, what? Okay, so at this point, the plane is landing, and I'm running as fast as I can. As soon as the plane lands, I run to where the plane landed. One of the pilots is coming out of the plane, and I go up to him before the military is able to get close to him, and I tell him, are you Portuguese? And he says, yes. And I said, oh my God. And I explained everything in Portuguese, what was happening. And I said, they're saying that he doesn't have the right paperwork, but if you are okay, that I think you can convince them to let us into the plane, because he didn't have the visa for Dubai, and that was our next stop.
A pilot could just bullshit that one, maybe.
The pilot could say no, and actually, it's not a good idea you can't take anyone on your plane if they don't have the visa to go to the next place. But because I think
my producer's going to kill me.
I'm kill you, sorry.
Yeah.
But because he's Portuguese, and because he was Portuguese, I think, and because we spoke our language, I think in many ways that helped. And so anyway, fast forward. He starts talking to the military. Kader is there helping. Everybody gets on the plane. I'm the last one. I'm running to the plane, happiest moment of my life. And I hear somebody call, Mariana, Mariana, Mariana. And I look back, and it's Kader, and he turns to me and says, happy birthday to your son.
Oh,
And that's the moment that everything came out of.
Oh, my gosh.
I started crying.
How glad... Did you kiss the ground in Dubai when you landed? I would imagine you guys must have.
Kissed the ground in the U.S. when I landed at JFK, yeah.
I would be like, pilot, tell us the second we are out of missile range from Niger ground forces or out of the board, like this big red box.
Yeah, the whole team was crying. And the saddest part for us was like, I remember looking out the window and just thinking, it was a terrible 10 days for us, but this is the future of a country with incredible promise and amazing people. Everyone from the gold miners, the gold traders, to the people working at our hotel, to Kader. These are all amazing human beings who, every chance they had, were trying to help us, and who are people just like you and I. Their mothers and fathers, and who now have their future up because of politics and leadership.
It's interesting. When that coup happened, a lot of people online were like, good, they're getting rid of the colonial French, and they're standing up for... And obviously those people don't know anything about these kinds of things. No. They just believe whatever the sort of Russian, look, they're overthrowing the imperialist Americans. Look, the military is going to let people live free now. And it's like, that's not how any junta has ever worked in the history of military.
No, and these countries have enormous promise and potential, but they need investment. And what we were doing up until that point was that there was actually a lot of investment. The United States invested, I think, over $100 million in building these military bases. They had 2 military bases there. No longer was money lost, but the idea behind those military bases was to prevent attacks from terrorist groups that would eventually possibly what happened in Afghanistan, organize and attack the United States. So, security in other countries matters ultimately for security here at home. Yeah. And that's what was happening there and is not happening anymore, unfortunately.
I was surprised to hear one of your sources said that commercial airlines in the U.S. transport the most drugs. Not like truckers or secret network. It's like, no, that lady who has 3 bags on Delta Plus, 2 of them are closed and one of them is full of methamphetamine.
Right. And Delta, wasn't that interesting that he said, this was our interview for Cartel USA, we interviewed a guy called El Gringo, who's an American guy, doesn't speak a word of Spanish, yet is one of the biggest distributors for the cartel here in the U.S. Fascinating guy. And he says when I asked him, how do you distribute drugs? And I was thinking, he was saying, I have these like 4-wheel trucks. That's what I was thinking. He's like, no, Delta Airlines.
Yeah, Delta Airlines.
Delta Airlines.
Got 1 million miles.
Yeah, strippers. Strippers and Delta Airlines.
I thought that was interesting. Why strippers?
I think women is always better, right? Because they're less, people suspect them less. And I think strippers, because they're more likely to do risky behavior. I'm not sure why.
Flirt their way out of a situation successfully.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, they know how to charm people. I think,
Is it, don't open that, it's full of adult toys. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what the advantage is there.
I think the way they dress too probably throws people
maybe
off or I mean, nothing against strippers.
No, I mean, it's a legal way to make money, except if you're transporting drugs for El Gringo.
Exactly.
Then you're on the line. How long does it take to plan and shoot each episode of the show?
A long time, months, sometimes even
Really?
years. Like the Niger episode, we started pitching it on season 2, and it took us 2.5, 3 years to convince NatGeo that it was safe for us to go to Niger.
Oh, I wondered. So NatGeo has to sign off on this stuff. I
everything.
thought maybe you made it and then you just sold them the
No.
episodes or something.
No, so it's very much a partnership where every story, we pitch them stories at the beginning of each season, and then they say yes to some and no to others. The majority of the stories they say yes to, but there are definitely stories that they're not interested in. And then once we start, even before we hit the ground, we have weekly meetings with them and discussing everything. This is who we're interviewing, this is how the story is going to unfold, or this is what we're hoping to get. And even when we're on the ground, we have to send them reports. And then they see, when we get back and we start editing, they see rough cut 1, rough cut 2, all of the
Jeez.
final cut, fine cut, all of it.
Were they
they're very, very
thrilled about your Niger experience after not wanting to do it for 3 seasons? And they're like, good thing we let you do that, and it cost us $100,000 in rescue fees or whatever.
Yeah, my first thought when I realized there had been a coup was, shit, Nat Geo is going to be so pissed.
So pissed.
And they're going. My thought was like, Nat Geo, they're going to get their security people involved, and they're going to want to pull us out of the country immediately, and we haven't even finished our story. And then I realized, oh, no, even if we wanted to get out of the country, we can't.
No, the NatGeo security people were like, we got to get him out of there. Oh, it's impossible?
It's
All right, I'm
impossible.
going on vacation then, because there's nothing I can do from here.
No, they were lovely. They tried. They were also having sleepless nights trying to figure out how to help us.
This is going to be a bad look if they all get murdered.
Yeah, it's not
How do
good.
we figure this out?
Yeah.
Which episode made you feel the most unsafe when filming, except for, of course, that
Niger.
one? Yeah.
It's always, I think the Assassins one in season 4. Sorry, that was season 4. Yeah, that was sort of scary. Some moments. Obviously, we're not talking about drugs or scams. It's actual assassins. So there were moments of that weren't so comfortable. I've been in situations with the cartel, several, where sort of the Marines are showing up and it's trying to see who can save themselves. Free for all, where everybody just tries to get out of there as fast as they can.
Oh my gosh.
And when you're with the cartel, there's always a dilemma. What do I do? Do I pretend I'm with them and just follow them, or do we try to hide if the Marines show up? And then they're going to think that we're. It's just always complicated. What do you do? What do you decide?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You need like a white surrender Nat Geo flag that says like
yellow. It would be yellow in that case. 'cause
Yeah,
it's
we're
Nat
here.
Geo.
We're just interviewing these people.
Yeah, which is why in some situations we always carry press passes with us, and in some situations like in Niger, we also have press things on the side of the trucks that we travel with, and that's always important too.
Oof, that's
but
scary.
that unfortunately matters less and less in the world we live today.
It does, yeah. I mean, I remember back in the day, I used to go out and like take photos of things, and then it was like, now you need a bulletproof vest with the press Velcro to take photos of things. And it was like, and you should probably get a helmet and goggles to do this.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh no, the cops are still going to shoot you in the head with a rubber bullet
no
anyway,
matter how much
they just don't care.
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, well, this job,
sad.
maybe I should get a different job.
Is that how you find yourself here?
That's right, exactly. Is there anything you learned while planning these episodes that almost got you into trouble? Like, thank God we have a satellite tracker, or thank God you mentioned you have the hostile environment training, but what is that? What do you do? What do you do with that knowledge?
Everything. I mean, they teach us what to do if somebody gets shot, how to use a tourniquet.
Oh, so it's like wilderness. What is it? Like first responder?
Yeah, first responders, but also then real scenarios. They show us videos of situations where things get, like where there's shootings, but also if you're being followed, what to do to evade surveillance. Telecommunications, how to make sure that you're not being listened, how to protect your sources. It's like a broad, you learn everything. I remember an interesting, funny story about this is for season 1, when we first started shooting Trafficked, I'd been reporting on black markets for years at that point, but I had just hired a team of camera folks that hadn't. They, in fact, had been working with Anthony Bourdain on his show.
Oh, right.
And then
different gig.
Yeah, very different game. That came to an end, and I reached out and I asked if they wanted to work on my show. I loved the Bourdain show, and I loved how it looked, and I sort of had spent a lot of time doing these stories, but doing them with like handheld cameras and not the best quality. And we wanted to, with Trafficked, we wanted to combine sort of gonzo journalism or, boots on the ground journalism with beautiful imagery,
Yeah.
NatGeo style, right? And so we hired these guys. And so it was one of their, I think, the first hostile environment training of this type, where we're actually going to hang out with the cartel and
Wow.
the criminal underworld. And I remember the guy that was teaching us at the time. He's a British former military dude, really fun guy. And he turns to us and he says, "Okay, so now what do we do if you get kidnapped? Ladies, there is a chance you will be raped."
Yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
if this, and then explains what to do in those situations. And I look at the guys and they're like, "Oof, yes, oh my God, that's not happening." And then he looks at the guys and he's like, "Gentlemen, it's not an if, you are going to get raped. So this is what you have to do."
Oh my God.
And I see all of their faces like, what?
Yeah.
I don't know if we should be doing this show. And they were brave and they did it.
I
but
was
we still talk
filming
about
old
that.
Vietnamese ladies cooking pho on the side of a street in Hanoi last season. What the hell did you get me into?
That's right.
Yeah. Jeez. Oh my God.
But they did it, and no one got raped.
Yeah, no, it's so far, season 5. Yeah, I thought it was interesting the Sinaloa cartel is murdering the fentanyl cooks now, or
Yeah.
recently. Can you explain why that is? Because I thought that was, you explained well in the show, but I think people are going to be confused. There's tons of fentanyl here in the United States. It's coming from the cartel, or it was coming from the cartel. Now there's bodies piling up on top of 20,000 fentanyl pills under an overpass. What's going on?
Yeah. So the authorities, the American authorities, started going really heavy on the Chapo family, right? The sons, the Chapitos, as they called it,
Right.
sons of El Chapo. El Chapo was caught, brought to the United States, and then the Sinaloa cartel was run by the Chapitos on one side, and El Mayo, who's the legendary partner, sort of shadow partner of El Chapo. Everybody knows El Chapo, but nobody knows El Mayo, but he was the equal partner for the Sinaloa cartel, and in many ways sort of more crucial to the operations of the cartel. He was the guy that sort of, the whole corruption, that had the liaison, the partnerships with governments and law enforcement around the world in order to be able to move his drugs at the scale that they did. And so once El Chapo was brought to the United States, the government started really going after, particularly the Chapitos, because they were in charge of a lot of the fentanyl production. And I don't know if you remember, there was a thing called the Culiacanazo, where the Mexican Marines went and detained, apprehended Ovidio Guzman.
Oh, was this
who
when
was
they
one of the
surrounded the
Chapo's
barracks?
son. Yeah, exactly.
And said, we're going to kill all your
Yeah.
families if you don't let it go?
Yeah, so the military detains this dude, the son of El Chapo, and immediately all the different factions of the Sinaloa cartel got together and said, no, we're not going to let this happen. So they brought the whole of the Culiacan, which is the capital of Sinaloa, down to its knees and demanded the release of El Chapo, of Ovidio Guzman, El Chapo's son. They released him. A few years later, but they released him because they had to. It was so embarrassing for the government, for the Mexican government. And it empowered the American government in this pursuit too, because what they're saying, you guys aren't going to be able
Right.
to bring them to justice, so we are going to work with you, and we're going to be much more involved in making sure that we're bringing them to justice and stopping the production of fentanyl. And so there started to be more and more pressure, because now they're dealing with the American government wanting to come there and take them and arrest them. And so when it started getting heated, they realized, okay, we have to do something about it, because nobody wants to end up in jail,
Right.
in prison. So they asked, let's stop production of fentanyl, because that will get the authorities off our backs, the American authorities off our backs, they thought. And they did, and they stopped production for a while. But because there's not just one or two chemists, it's hundreds or thousands of chemists, and they all depend on this now for a living, a lot of chemists decided to not abide by the rules, the
Right.
new rules of the cartel, and they kept making fentanyl. So those were the ones who started being killed. What I heard when we were doing that story, because it made no sense, because I knew that there was still fentanyl coming across, was that they already had large deposits. So they were going to move those deposits of fentanyl to the United States and stop the production in the hopes that that would prevent the American government from coming after them.
So like, oh, we're going to stop producing it. Great. What we didn't tell them was we have 15 million pills in a
tons
warehouse somewhere.
and we went to one of those labs where it was still being produced.
Yeah.
But then we also went to an underground lab with a guy showing us that he was a chemist, and he did everything in an underground lab under his house, which was insane.
That was insane. It was like a
so
drainage
crazy.
tunnel.
It was a drainage tunnel, yeah. That
Crazy.
happened to pass under his house, and then he figured that out. He was like, I have the best lab
Yeah.
situation in the world. Like, nobody's ever going to
Concrete
find me.
bunker. Yeah.
So we went under, and he wasn't producing fentanyl anymore because he was visited by 2 cartel members who basically threatened to kill him if he continued.
Jeez, that's crazy to me. The trank dope thing is disgusting, by the way.
Oh, my.
So this is like dope mixed with xylazine, which I think is a veterinary tranquilizer.
Yeah, that's right, an animal tranquilizer, yeah.
So the whole, I mean, forget, don't just say no to drugs, like that whole campaign. Just show that lady's arm from the harm reduction clinic. So this looked like someone took hamburger meat, shoved it into a bag of human skin, and then soaked it in a sink for 3 days, and then just stabbed like 100 little holes in it with a needle.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen on TV. And I can imagine, it must have smelled horrendous, like terrible, because it looked like she just had a rotten arm. It was like a zombie.
Yeah, so we were there in a small clinic in Kensington, Pennsylvania, which is ground zero for trank dope. Trank dope, what it does is it's fentanyl mixed with the animal tranquilizer. And what it does is that fentanyl gives you a really high, but unlike heroin, the high goes away very fast. So they figured out a new drug that they could mix there, which is a tranquilizer, that allows that high to stay high longer. It allows you to stay high longer, which is ultimately what every drug user usually is after. And so they started using it, and they didn't even know there was tranquilizer in it. They just realized, oh, this is a good high, let's keep using this, right? But what they didn't know, and most people didn't, it's a new sort of medical phenomenon. Nobody has studied this because it's so new and it's never sort of shown up anywhere because nobody is, willingly using horse tranquilizer on themselves, is that it creates these horrible wounds that look like leprosy. Essentially, I don't know if you've seen films of like leprosy back in the day when it was still big in India, but it looks like that. It's like big open wounds with like pus coming out, and it's just one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. In this case, we were in this clinic run by these sort of volunteers, amazing people who are dressing the wounds and unwrapping, and we were seeing them doing this to dozens of people and asking if we could film. This woman agreed to be filmed, and we see this amazing guy who is doing, again, volunteering his time and opening up this wound. He's learned how, no medical training, but he's learned himself how to do it. And he's treating this woman's arm. And the moment he unwraps the what do you call it, the gauze. Yeah. The smell is everything you can imagine. It's super powerful. But yet this is a human being who's being treated, right? The worst thing I could do is start talking about how much this smelled, right? And what that taught me, and the guy said so well, as somebody who's been covering the drug epidemic for so long, is that we're approaching it all wrong. This is a public health crisis that's happening in America. We essentially have thousands of people on the streets of America nowadays hooked on this drug. You might think that they're there because they want to, and they're doing the drugs because they want to. Nobody wants to be out there like this. Nobody wants
Nobody would ever willingly do that.
Do this. It's a public health crisis. It's like leprosy. It's like so many other diseases that we've been able to combat and fight against. And here, for some reason, because we think that they have a choice, we allow it to happen. And the reason also why they're being treated in this like roadside clinic instead of going to hospitals, we spoke to a lot of these users, and they were all saying, we go to the hospitals, they think there's so much stereotyping, and they're stigmatized and they're treated as junkies, and not treated as human beings. And that's what with our episode we try to do, is really humanize these people and try to show this other side, that they're human beings just like us and need help. More than we do.
It's a scary path, right? Because I had a friend who had a back injury, so he got OxyContin. Yeah. And then he got hooked on OxyContin, and then he couldn't get it anymore, so he started doing heroin. But now you can't get heroin, so you do fentanyl,
and now you can't get fentanyl. You're doing trank dope.
Trank dope. So it's like
it's a fourth wave. Yeah.
You end up with a guy who's like a construction worker. This guy was an MMA fighter, but you get a back injury, and it's like ... 5 years later, or I don't know how, a few years later, they're in an alley covered in open sores, and it's like,
and Jordan,
disgusting.
Every conversation, every time I bring up the opiate epidemic, somebody has a story like that. And the vast majority of them starts with an injury, even I had an EP, I'm not going to name him, but I had an executive producer on television that worked with me for some time who had seen my coverage on the opiate epidemic and called me one day and says, hey, you have no idea what just happened to me. I went in for like a tooth surgery, and they gave me opiates, and I had no idea that I would be because some people have the brain chemistry that
hooked on
makes them
stuff.
hooked.
Yeah.
And he never had an addictive personality or anything. And he was like, I spent 2 months doing these opiates, and weaning off those opiates was the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And he said, I was on the verge of like a mental breakdown. He was just talking about how this normal person goes and in 2 months is super hooked on these drugs. And he doesn't know still how he managed to get off the other way. But for a lot of people, they don't. And so that's what I mean when I say it's not a choice. It isn't a choice.
It's terrifying. I mean, I'm curious how... You're clearly careful not to touch any of this stuff because if you go to a drug lab, I don't know, what kind of precautions do you take? Because that stuff is in the air and it's on the bag and it's on the table. And you put your elbow down and now you've got, I don't know,
as long as you don't put
elbow.
it on your mouth or your eyes or you ingest it, usually it's not a great idea. We were in Miami where they had bags and bags of trank dope and they were mixing the fentanyl with the xylazine. And we used gloves, which is the appropriate thing to do, and they were using gloves too. But when I was in a lab in Mexico and saw them making fentanyl, this was for season 2, we did a story, or season 1 of fentanyl. That was insane because the chemist that was making, we went in with like hazmat suits and like big masks and, respirators. And I mean, we looked like those movies about epidemics, where the scientists walk in there and they can barely move. That's what we looked like when we were filming. So it's me and my team, my guys are holding their cameras through their masks and we can barely move with these gigantic suits. And these dudes, 2 dudes from the Sinaloa cartel that made the chemists for Sinaloa cartel making fentanyl, and they had gloves and they had like one of those just COVID masks.
Yeah.
And
it's like a scarf wrapped around his face.
Yeah, and I was like, aren't you scared? He was like, no, this is actually great because I know the fentanyl is potent. I know I've got it. I know I've made it. He's making it. I know I've got the end product. When I start feeling through my skin, because it comes in through the skin, you see the fumes are everywhere.
Yeah.
This is why we're using these sort of respirator masks. But I know my heart starts beating really fast, and that's when I know I've got the good shit. These people are bananas.
My
It's
God,
insane.
these guys are crazy.
Yeah.
They're insane. One of the saddest episodes, I think, was the Hmong women in Vietnam getting kidnapped essentially and sold to Chinese men. Tell us how they get snatched and scammed, because it's really extra disturbing that it's not. I don't know why it's not better if their family sells them, don't get me wrong, but it's really scary to think you're going shopping and your friend's like, hey, let's go get something to drink, and then your friend sells you to a Chinese guy and you just vanish.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially what's happening there. We heard we talked to dozens of women who told similar stories, these are Hmong villages, so it's sort of impoverished communities in the mountains of northern Vietnam. And, not a lot of job opportunities, not a lot of, just education. And a lot of times they would meet people on, that kind of foreigners or, Chinese people or more wealthy Vietnamese people that would come through and they'd start charming them. It's a lot what happens here actually with pimps.
Like a romance scam kind of thing?
Yeah. And then say, hey, do you want to go for dinner with me? And then the next thing they know, they're being handcuffed and blindfolded and taken across the border to China and sold to men. And one of the most horrific stories I heard there was this woman, something similar to her happened. She was sort of kidnapped, sold. She found herself living in a small apartment with a Chinese man and his parents, all living in the same apartment. And this is happening in China, by the way, because of the one-child policy.
Right.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know, there's not enough women to marry in China because they had a
for
one-child
years,
policy. If you wanted a son, if you could only have one, you aborted or got rid of the girls, and now there's like one girl for every, I don't know.
Yeah, 3 men or something, 2 men or something. It's not as big, but there's a lot of single men. And in China, it's incredibly important, culturally, very important to get married. You're seen as a failure if you don't get married and if you don't have children. Your parents will be the biggest sort of sadness of their lives if your kids don't have kids, don't give you grandkids, basically. It's very important culturally in China. So there's enormous pressure on these men, and they can't find Chinese women, so they're going and paying people to go find them wives elsewhere. So this case of this Vietnamese woman shows up. She was young. I'm not sure if she was a teenager, but she was young. And she shows up at this small, tiny apartment. This guy, they lock her in a room. the parents live there too, but they lock her in the room. The guy comes in just to have sex with her. She eventually gets pregnant, is forced to give birth to this child. They take away the child from her and let her see the child once in a while, let the child go into the room to be with her.
Oh my God.
She gives birth to a second child, and then after they want 2 kids, give them to 2 kids, and then they say, okay, if you want, you can go back to Vietnam. And she says, well, will I be able to see my kids again? And says, no. You can either go back to Vietnam and be with your family, or you stay here and you live your rest of your life locked in a room, but you'll be able to see your kids. So she had to make this decision.
It was terrible.
It was
You forgot that they sterilized her before she left because they didn't want her to start another family.
Family.
For what reason, I don't really understand.
Yeah, you see, I didn't even remember that part.
Yeah.
There are parts of it that I
That was
think
particularly horrifying.
Yeah.
Like, if they're going to let her go back and see the kids only on FaceTime, what's the difference if she has more kids? They just didn't want her to? I don't know. It seemed extra evil.
It's extra evil. I mean, that's when she totally, when I started talking about her kids and how often does she get to talk to them, because it's not just that she is not able to live with the kids or ever see them
Right.
again, is the fact that she has to live with the guilt of having made that choice, right? That she abandoned her children and that it's her fault.
Yeah.
It's just one of the most,
The whole thing was so disgusting. And I think, was she the one, she was like 12 when she got taken there by
can't
her
remember
friend?
how
There were a
old
few
she-
different,
yeah,
they blur
there was-
together in my
yeah.
mind, but her friend asked her to go hang out or something, and then she woke up in a car.
Yeah.
And the other one, she said they brought her to a room. There was a bunch of Vietnamese people in there. 2 of them or 3 of them tried to run away, and they cut their leg tendons so
Yeah.
they couldn't go
Yeah.
and run away. I mean, this is like a really large organized crime operation that's able to smuggle people
and that
across
nobody's
the border.
talking about it because it's not in the interest of either China or Vietnam to expose this. And, journalism is very heavily surveilled in those
Yeah.
countries. And our whole experience in Vietnam was insane. It was, at the moment we landed, we knew we were under surveillance. We had a government minder that would follow us everywhere. I had to show him my list of questions, so we'd pretend we had lists, I wrote fake questions, and then he'd give me okay. And then I'd sit down and start interviewing people. And the first person I interviewed, I started asking them the questions I wanted to ask. And these were people that had gotten in trouble for trafficking. They'd done time in prison and they were out. So they'd agreed to talk to us. So we're asking them questions. But then I start asking the questions that I wanted to ask. And immediately we get stopped from the government minder, who, by the way, is also traveling with a police officer. So we have a government minder and a police officer checking every single interview and listening, and there with us. And then our van one day disappears for hours, and it's our production van that we rented, but the government minder and the police decide to disappear with our van. So we know that it was either checked and bugged and probably both. And so that's when we realized, oh my God, they're not just listening in on our interviews. They're actually listening in on our private conversations in the van. And then there were situations in the hotel where I truly believe my phone was bugged at the hotel because it was a crazy light situation and conversations that I were having that I knew that there was no other way they would know unless they were listening.
Yeah.
So the whole situation was crazy, and we started sort of going out in the middle of the night when they weren't watching and trying to figure out ways to do this story.
It's a creepy feeling to have the government spying you. I went to North Korea, and it was just a tourism-ish trip, right? But I remember going...
When did you go?
This is I went 2012, 13, 14, and 15, I think.
You went every single year?
Yeah.
For 3-4 years?
For 4 years, yeah. And then it became illegal, actually, after that to go. So I had to sell the tour company. But I remember being...
But was your tour company? You would bring people?
Yeah, I was bringing people. So
fun.
It was like we had a partner in Beijing that was a British company running in China that would bring people. And they're like 20 years behind. So I was like, well, you need a website. And they're like, yeah, we have this URL / North Korea -trips. And I'm like, how about how to go to northkorea.com? And they're like, oh, that's a good idea. And then you would have to email them on a form that was broken half the time, or call China and leave a message, and they would call you back during business hours. And I was like, how about a chatbot in the corner where people ask questions, and then it says, we don't know, we'll email you back, put your email in, and a squeeze and newsletters. And they were just like, wow.
Blown away.
Yeah. So we were like, wait, we're going to run this and we'll sell you the leads. And so that was the company. And then I would get all these free trips. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And I talk about it on the show, and people go, I want to go with you.
Me too.
So we would go, and then it would fill up another one and another one and another one. I just kept going for free. It was fun. But I remember being in the hotel, and there's the hotel phone, and it was on a desk. And, when you're at a hotel, there's a wire for the lamp and a wire for the phone. This desk had 100 wires coming out of the back. And I'm thinking, one of these is for the phone, one of these is for the lamp. What are the other gazillion wires? And then you'd be talking with a friend in there, and the phone light would turn on a little bit and then turn off when you're done.
That's right. That's what was happening in my. But I kept thinking maybe I'm imagining this because
that's what I thought too.
How technically inept must they be to not figure out how to not make that light go on?
Yeah. Well, Soviet era wiretapping technology from this North Korea / China. Right. And I remember things like that. And I remember being in the bathroom and people were like, do you think they're filming us? And I was like, don't be ridiculous. And then I remember taking a really long shower and all the steam went on the mirror except for this circle.
Oh my God.
And I was like, why would that be there? And it was like, only if that's a different temperature than the rest of the mirror. And it's like, well, what's a circle? And it's like, why would it be right there? And I was like, guys, turn on your shower. Tell me if you have a circle. And they're like, yeah, we have a circle. And it's not in the exact same spot. So it's not like the mirror was made and there's a glass thing there. It was like somebody's circle was a little bit over here and another person's circle was a little bit up here. And I was like, that is a freaking, there's something behind the mirror.
Wow. Have you watched the Apple show Silo, by the way? If you watch it, that's exactly where they hid all the cameras is behind the mirror.
Oh my gosh. So we snuck up, there's a hidden floor in the hotel where you stay.
Yeah.
And we walked through that floor. This is where Otto Warmbier actually walked through that floor, but the kid who got arrested and then it ended up dying there. So we would walk through that floor and they would catch us there. But I remember going and we'd just say, oh, we're looking for the bathroom.
Why is it a secret?
It's a secret floor because it's employees only and they have meeting rooms and there's propaganda posters all over the walls and everything. And he stole one of those posters. That's why he went to jail.
Oh, shit.
But we walked around there and when they would catch us, we would just say, we're looking for the bathroom and pretend to be really drunk or actually be really drunk as the case was happened to be. And I remember one time we were walking around and we walked to sort of a dead end in the hallway on one of the hallways and there was a pile of cameras on the floor. And it was like, why do they have a pile of cameras? Where would those go? I mean, they obviously go in
100%.
the rooms or in the public
doubt.
area. And it's just like, I remember looking at the little circle lens in the camera and going, I wonder how big that is exactly. And I wanted to go and touch it and be like, okay, and then go back to my shower and be like, okay. But I didn't have a chance to do that. But I was just thinking, like, I wonder if they're filming us in the frickin' bathroom.
Oh, my God. That's,
So,
I didn't think about it in the bathroom. But
you question your sanity, though, right? Like, you're like, I'm being paranoid. Why would they care? But weird things do happen. Like, year one, you go in there, you tell them what you do, you run a podcast, and then 3 years later, you have the same guide, and he goes, Jordan, how's your podcast going? And you're like, okay.
There's no way
you either have the best memory of anybody I've ever met, or there's a file on me that you read before I get here, and you're like, oh, that's the podcast guy. Because what the hell? Even though it's North Korea, you've still had 300 people come in per year besides me. So what the hell? What the heck, Lee? And so that's
unnerving. Yeah,
it's unnerving. Yeah, and you start gaslighting yourself, like, no, that can't be. This can it? No, I'm being paranoid. I'm not that important. But that he did know that thing. It's just bizarre being watched like that.
Yeah, there was a moment where we all decided we were going to get, so we're in the northern Vietnam, and again, we're being followed, and everything we're doing, we're thinking, oh my God, this is crazy. They know everything, all our moves and everything. And we all decide we're going to get, because they do a lot of tailoring in Vietnam. You can get your suits done for like $100. You get the most beautiful custom-made suit. So my whole team decided we're all going to get suits made. So we do.
Silk suits.
And then that night, we're having... I think we kind of left the hotel without telling our government minder and went to eat good Vietnamese food. And there we are, and who shows up? But the tailor, and he's sitting at a table right next to us, and he's like, "This is bananas." And this is like a big town with lots of restaurants, and we're thinking the tailor is also a spy. Tinker Tailor, what's that thing?
Sailor spy. And then it's like, no, it's just a coincidence. Is it though? Or did the government minder go like, "Hey, they think I'm not following them. You have to go follow them and pretend that you're just seeing them there."
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, it could be level of paranoia. It could be actually all
exactly.
real.
Just because what's that phrase? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they aren't out to get you.
Yeah.
And it's like, this might actually be the case. You mentioned in the Vietnam episode that in some of the villages, something like 10% of the people are missing.
Yeah,
which is
some of the smaller
think about
villages.
that.
Yeah, some of with the women. Yes, and some of them, trafficking organizations that work there believe that a lot of them were in fact kidnapped and taken to China. Some of them, take jobs in big cities and don't come back, but it's still an enormous number. And you have families all over Vietnam looking for their daughters, having no idea what happened to them.
I mean, if you take a job, don't you call your parents and say, "By the way, I'm alive"?
Yeah, of course you
So
would.
that's maybe they took a job, but then you're not missing. You're just not at home.
Right.
That's different.
Exactly.
So I don't know. And they kidnap these people often off the street, and I think you'd mentioned something like the witnesses, bystanders don't intervene because there's a ritual.
So that's what's so unfortunate about all this
Yeah.
too, is that in the Hmong culture, the way that people get engaged, or one of the cultural traditions that they have there, is that for a man to ask for a woman's hand to get married, there's some weird, strange cultural tradition where they go and kidnap them from a public street, take them on the back of their bike or take them in the car, wherever, and it's sort of a thing that they do, and then they go and present them to the parents, and they get engaged. The problem is that this is also how traffickers are kidnapping women. So they're actually using sort of the cultural tradition as a disguise to actually kidnap women. And it's very unfortunate.
I grew up in Detroit, near Detroit, and there's a lot of Hmong there from after the Vietnam
really?
War. It's like one of our ethnic minorities that no one else has ever heard of. And
that's why you're so comfortable saying their name back and forth. I was like, no one knows about the Hmong. And yet Jordan,
everyone
here
says
he is.
Hmong or something. It's wrong.
Yeah.
And anyway, so my friend was dating one of these girls, and they ended up getting engaged. And she's like, "So here's the thing, you have to kidnap me with your friends."
Right. So you know this too.
Yeah. And I remember being like, "How are we doing this?" And he's like, "Yeah, I have to plan a kidnapping." I didn't end up being part of it. It would have been awesome, but because he ended up postponing it and stuff, and I moved. But basically, he had to stage a kidnapping where it was like a bunch of buddies and him had to go when her and her friends were hanging out unexpectedly. I mean, it was all planned. And then go and kidnap her and then basically show up with her to the parents and be like, "I'm marrying your daughter." And it's pretty cool when it's not actually human trafficking.
Right. And it was really hard actually, because there's a ton of footage out there on YouTube of real kidnappings and of these traditions. So even for us, like our archival producer lost their mind trying to figure out what's real and what's just a marriage proposal, you know? It took a long time. But I'm so happy you mentioned that, because you hear, even we're reporting, we fact check, but it's good to have this corroborated. Like this is actually the case, and it happens even outside of the country.
It's just a small, but it's unusual. And I remember being like, she's messing with you, dude. Don't do that. You're going to get arrested. And it was like, you have to plan it carefully, because if your neighbors see you yanking a girl out of the house, they're going to call the police and you're going to get shot or arrested.
And no one's going to believe that you're actually...
No, here's the thing, officer.
I love this woman.
It's a ritual. We've been dating for a while. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Tell it to the judge.
Sure.
Tell it to the judge. I was so frustrated for you during these Vietnam interviews, though. Yeah. Like, "Hey, do you know anyone who's human trafficking?" And they look over to the cop and the government minder, and they're like, "Nope,
not me."
It's like,
and meanwhile, I know that he was a human trafficker.
Like, bro, you just got out of prison for human trafficking.
Right.
We all know that you're guilty. You did your time.
Right.
What's the deal? I don't know. Nothing. Don't worry about it. And it's like, oh, for God's sake, why did we show up and do this?
And we had people who agreed to talk to us. The police showed up at their house and told them not to talk to us. So it was really hard. And it wasn't really until we sort of partnered with that Asian undercover group of journalists. They were amazing. And they were the ones who went into some of these brothels using undercover footage. And they were actually able to get all the stuff that we needed. Because until that point, we thought we didn't have a story. And then we met them, and they started doing this incredible work, and I was like, okay, so this, at least we have footage of this actually happening, because nobody wanted to talk to us.
Well, the brothel thing is extra gross. So you think like, oh, they're getting married off to guys in China. All right, they're starting a family. It's definitely not ideal. It's definitely still human trafficking. And then you find out, oh, not all of them get married. Some of them just get locked in a storage units so that they can get raped over
the
and
ones
over.
that don't get married. You
Right.
think the worst of the worst is living in the situation that woman lived, right, in the house with the family, Chinese family locked in the room and forced to give birth to kids. But in this case, there's even worse, which are those that don't get married. They're put in brothels because the traffickers have to figure out how to make money out of this you know, commodity. For them, these women are just commodities. And yeah, being locked in those rooms. And this undercover journalist, it's this incredible work where he shows up at this brothel and he says he's like this long corridor, and every single door, on both sides are women that are locked and forced to have sex with men, and they're not making any money.
And they're in the dark.
In the dark. And so he goes into one of the rooms. It's complete darkness in there. Once he gets in, at one point, I think he turns on the light, and they tell him, no, turn off the light, because he wants to see what's happening. It's the madam that runs the brothel that takes him there. As soon as he gets in, she locks the door from the outside. So then he's in there. He says he saw there was 3 women, and they start whispering to him and saying, okay, what can we do for you? And he's like, nothing, because he was just filming undercover. Nothing. I don't want anything from you. And trying to figure out how you can get out of there. And they start saying, look, if you don't have sex with one of us, you have to pick one, because if you don't have sex with one of us, they're going to beat us. So you have to pick one.
God.
And it's this moment for him where he's trying to figure out what to do. And then he just starts knocking on the door and comes up with an excuse that he doesn't like the darkness or something. I can't remember exactly what was his excuse to get out of there. But he got the footage of that whole situation.
It's so creepy. And you just have, like in my house watching this, in my office, comfortable, a beverage in my hand. And I'm just like, oh my God. The only real difference is I just happen to not be born in a village in the mountains of Vietnam.
Yeah.
It's like the dice roll.
The biggest learning that I've had from all these years covering black markets is that I usually use this line that I read once that I love, which is the wheel of history turns, and where and when you were born decides if you get determines whether you get crushed or raised by it, right? And we are the lucky ones, right? We got the lottery ticket, right? We were born where we were. We got opportunities that we did. We got access to great education, and so what I wanted Trafficked to be also is a great conversation starter for all of us to understand what are we doing with these opportunities that we're given. Because we're not, the girl in Vietnam, or even some of these traffickers that, even some sicarios in Sinaloa, where this is the environment they grew up in. This is all that's offered to them. This is all they know. And I will never forget this interview that I did with like a 16, 17-year-old kid in Peru who's carrying cocaine on his back, like kilos and kilos of cocaine, backbreaking work through the mountains of Peru, seeing some of his friends being killed in front of him by rival groups. He's like, at this point, has seen dozens of people being killed, extreme violence, really difficult work, really dangerous. And when I asked him, why are you doing this? He says, look, I've always wanted to be a dentist. I've always wanted to go to college. My parents can't afford it. And so this is the only work that I will allow me to go to college. And I say, why college? What do you want to do? He says, I want to be a dentist. And I ask him, why do you want to be a dentist? Because in my little town, all the posters that I see for dentist offices are people, is like posters of people with big smiles. So I want to make people smile. I want to make people
cry
happy.
on my own show. That's so sad.
I know.
So instead he's humping cocaine through the jungle.
Exactly. Hoping that one day he can become a dentist.
Oh,
so that's what I want the show to be. Yeah. I want people to see many of these traffickers. Again, we do not condone what they do.
Of course.
And many of them are, it's difficult to even empathize. But the majority of the people that I talk to are people just like you and me that are born, that don't have the opportunities or the luck that we have.
Yeah, you do a good job of not glamorizing it, but humanizing the people involved.
Yeah.
But not sort of making excuses for the people who are doing criminal activity.
And I ask all of them hard questions. It's my job also as a journalist I'm not there to then have fun with them, right?
Yeah.
Even though I'm trying to connect on a human level and treat people with respect and try to find the humanity out of them. Because by finding the humanity, then you really sort of get the depth of the reporting that you need to understand why things like this happen. But at the same time, I'm also holding them accountable for what they do. So even the cartel, like you're always told there are questions that you don't ask the cartel. I will always ask those questions of the cartel.
What's a question you don't ask the cartel?
Oh, one of the first ones is what cartel they belong to. They don't like being asked that. Or, bosses and structures or names and things like that. But I always, I try to always do my job as a journalist, which is hold people accountable.
Props, by the way, to whoever does the music on the show, because whoever they are, they find like the best obscure Vietnamese rap with an electronic music dance beat behind it. And I'm like, whoever picked that is fire. Like
I think that was
such
actually
good
our
taste.
director on
He's
that
so
episode.
good.
Rob Maraskin is really good with music. Yeah.
I was like, where do you even find something like that? Like you don't type that into Spotify and find that as a hit.
We also have an amazing music supervisor. His name's Dan Wilcox. He's been on KCRW. Do you know the show Morning Becomes Eclectic? It's like
no.
this show in LA that's like, Anyway, he's an amazing music supervisor. He also finds really good music. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to have something like that.
Yeah.
Because someone is just spending hours finding the perfect track, or gets really lucky here and there and finds a track, or finds a track and goes, one day I'm going to use this. And then when they're looking for music, is like, Vietnamese rap from the 90s. I'm doing it.
I love that you notice it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's part of the production thing, and it's like, I would love to do a show. Like, if I did a TV show, I would do Trafficked. I mean, it's already taken, but I'm like, very rarely do I envy someone else's job, because I have a pretty cool one, too. I talk to smart people, interesting people all day. But Trafficked, I'm like, would I trade? Maybe. I mean, it's a little scary getting stuck in Niger after a coup. I do have little kids. My wife would not be interested in me trading. But I'm like, I could probably do a couple seasons of Trafficked.
Yeah, you know, you came to an end. We did 5 episodes. This was the last, 5 seasons. This was the last season, yeah.
I did not know that.
So we're looking to do...
So there goes my final question was, what do we expect next season?
There goes your-
well, screw that.
See, I told you not to have
Ruined
questions.
it. Now I'm paying the price for that. What's your favorite part of the job, you think? Or what was your favorite part of the job?
What comes next? Let me tell you what comes next.
Oh,
because
sure.
I'm still
Fine.
working in black markets. I have a podcast that I love.
Yeah.
I started doing this a few months ago. And I think the way I describe it is, in many ways, Trafficked was sort of the map of these black markets. And the podcast is a little bit like the diary, right?
Yeah.
It's where I actually get to sit with people and have intimate conversations. On Trafficked, you'd see like these people have incredible, fascinating stories, and yet you'd hear like 2, 3, 4 minutes of their
Right.
lives. And here I have a platform where we can talk, and I can understand, who they are, why they do what they do, and it's really these are people with some of the most fascinating lives, right?
Yeah.
People that work and have operated somehow in these black markets. So I've got that, and I'm working on other shows. But what was your question about?
It was what's for next season, but it's not.
Yeah,
there's
but
no
then you
next
asked
season.
me something else, which is what I love most about my
the funnest
job.
part of the job.
I mean, it's just the privilege of a lifetime, right?
Yeah.
Being able to see things that nobody else sees, and connecting with people that I would never, becoming friends with. Like victims of human trafficking in Vietnam, or with, the kid that's carrying cocaine, or, a Jamaican scammer, Tweety, that I'll never forget. There's all these people, again, not condoning what a lot of them do, but creating connections with them and feeling like the privilege of walking in their shoes for a little bit and understanding their lives is amazing. It just, expands your mind in a way that I think we all should be exposed to.
I agree. I mean, why end it then? Is that just NatGeo?
It wasn't my choice.
Oh, boo. Okay, sorry about that.
NatGeo's choice. I think it's a bunch of reasons. NatGeo is owned by Disney. And, amazing company, great company, but they're not known to love risks, risky undertakings. We had a lot of situations that were very risky, including Niger. It's also a show that at times becomes political. I think Disney doesn't like to be political and likes to stay away from that. I think that it's a costly show. It's a very expensive show for all the security reasons and insurance reasons.
Sure.
In general, working in the Disney family, there's a lot of hoops and a lot of requirements that they expect from you that makes the show even more expensive. So it's generally just an expensive show. And we did 5 amazing seasons.
Yeah.
We got nominated for 29 Emmys. Last year was the most
Wow.
Emmy-nominated unscripted show in the history of the Emmys, which is crazy. And we're going to be up for a bunch, hopefully. Oh my God, I'm jinxing it already.
Yeah, careful.
We're applying. We're submitting to the Emmys this year for season 5.
Great.
And I'm going to figure out a way to keep doing what I do elsewhere.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you can do it on YouTube or
Yeah.
with another, there's so many apps and streaming services now. You don't really, it's kind of like with podcasting. When I was younger, I wanted to be on the radio, and then I got on satellite radio, and it was like, I don't need it. The station manager would go, what if you do this really lame thing that makes your show exactly like everyone else's show, and then we cancel it because it's just like everyone else's show, but not.
Right.
And it's like, no thanks, I'm going to do this podcasting thing. And I remember everybody was like, what a loser. Podcasting is for losers. Now all those radio guys are doing podcasts because it makes more money, and you don't have to listen to some knucklehead station manager who doesn't understand what you do.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So that's my plan for the future, is that I can figure out how to grow the YouTube channel that I have.
By the way, South Africa looks so cool and beautiful, but holy crap, that place is the Wild West. Your armored car heist thing.
Yeah, that was a crazy story, right? The heist.
Yeah. The heist crews blowing up armored cars, and then they're like, oh, how do we keep these people secure? And it's like helicopter chase and escort thing. And I'm like, can't you just have more guards? And they're like, oh, that sounds expensive. We're not doing that.
It's sort of it's a war game between the security companies and the robbers and the heist gangs. And they're all trying to one-up each other, and they're all one-upping each other constantly. So now you've got like a war on the highways of South Africa. It's insane, in Johannesburg particularly, and Durban. Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. And this woman's like, oh, our plan, since they're shooting these, is to make them bomb-proof. It's like, maybe there's another solution.
So first it was like, make them bulletproof, right? Which they did. And then the heist crews were like, oh, yeah? Take a look at this.
And this rifle that shoots through bulletproof,
and they started bombing, using explosives to open these things up. And now we're going to make them bomb-proof. And they're going to come up with something else. It's a cat and mouse game,
You could not pay me enough to be an armored car driver in South Africa after seeing that episode. No
the guy who's been shot multiple times, who thought he was dead.
He'd been robbed like 14 times?
And then there's a video, which is insane, where and it looks like an active war zone. Essentially, he's being shot at from all sides. He's wounded. He thinks he's about to die. He's like trying to get his radio to call for help, and then he gets back on a truck like a couple months later and is back doing that armored truck.
That was the guy who's like, oh, he's going to kill me. So he's shot the guy through like a hole in the truck.
He did, and he was able to shoot the guy.
I mean, this is like a story from Iraq.
Yeah.
And
I know,
like,
or Hollywood,
Yeah. And he's like an old dude who looks like he should be a mall security guard.
Yeah, so this is the part that made me feel bad, is that this guy, obviously, I asked him, why isn't he retiring? Because he can't afford to retire.
Right.
He's taken bullets for the security company.
Right.
Just give this guy his full pay and let him retire, right?
And I don't know what wages are like in South Africa, but I'm going to go ahead and guess he's not making a six-figure salary.
No, not at all.
These
guys are making nothing, and they're risking their lives. Yes, making nothing. Yes.
Yeah. I notice you're emotional at times with interviewees, people who've lost children, or simply saying insane things like the pastor we talked about before, like gay people should be executed and stuff. How do you decide when to blur the line between like 60 Minutes journalist who shows absolutely no emotion and being more human with the person in front of you?
I never, that line doesn't exist for me, because I believe journalism is not just about holding people accountable, and it's not about objectivity. I think part of our jobs as journalists, perhaps one of the most important jobs, is connecting people with creating connections between us, the viewers, the listeners, and people on the other side of the world that we think we have nothing in common with, right? I think that's one of the most powerful tools in journalism. I also think that in many situations, the job of a journalist is very much like a caretaker, right? When I'm interviewing the victims and even some of the really sad stories behind some of the traffickers and people involved in these black markets, I am almost their therapist. You know, these are people who've never shared their stories. There's a very important caretaking part of the journalism profession that people usually don't talk about, that I think is very important. And it's the only way that you can show the complete picture. And I am also a human being. So if I am going to get emotional, I am going to show that I am emotional. And I'm hoping that the viewers and listeners will feel that and will feel what I'm feeling at the time and will care. Ultimately, it's all about making people care, right, about these issues in the world.
Yeah, would you let your son do Trafficked on NatGeo, or would you talk him out of it?
I've never been asked that.
Yeah.
I would love for him to be a journalist because I love my job so much, and I think he's 15 years old now. I think that it's just I've led such a fascinating life that I wouldn't want him not to have it. I would be worried, but one of the things that my parents taught me, and I think part of the reason why I am the way I am, is that they were never fearful. they were never helicopter parents, right? They allowed me to explore the world. If I wanted to go up trees, if I wanted to move to Syria, which I did right after.
Syria?
Yeah, I moved to Syria right after Columbia University. The war in Iraq had just started. I wanted to be close to the action. I wanted to be, reporting from the Middle East at the time. I didn't know anyone in Syria. I didn't know Arabic. I was basically next door to a huge war. And my parents never told me, don't go, right? They were always supporters and trusted my common sense, sometimes to their detriment. But that's the kind of parent I am too with my son, is I want him to explore the world. I want him to make mistakes. I want him to sometimes feel uncomfortable, get outside his comfort zone. I think that's very important. And I think there's a instinct, or not an instinct, but usually parents try to protect their kids to their detriment in a way sometimes, too much. I'm not saying that, yes, my son, go out and hang out with drug traffickers, but do something every day that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, because that's the way that you evolve and you become a better human being.
I agree with that. It's easy for us to say, and then it's like, Mom, I'm going to go to Venezuela and I'm going to meet up with these people who are human traffickers that also sell cocaine. And you're like, I come from zero credibility telling you not to do that because it's too dangerous. Yeah. So have fun.
Right. I would basically, he's 15 right now, so obviously he wouldn't go now. But later in life, when I went to Syria, I was like 26 or 27 years old. And when I started doing these stories, I was around that age. And I think at that point I had a little bit of experience. I was a little bit more mature. I had conversations with my parents about it. And I think that I would prepare him and tell him everything that I know, and hope that he would make good decisions, and have the training that he needs to have. Although I didn't have any training when I went to those places, so that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
But I would try to get him to.
Hold on, Mommy's coming with you.
Probably. Yeah. I'd be with binoculars.
Yeah, well, I won't say anything. I swear, I'll just hang out in the van. No, Mom. Although it would be great to have your mom be your EP if your mom is Mariana van Zeller. Is there any place that's been just impossible to film in so far, but is on the top of your list?
Oh, North Korea would be one of them.
Yeah.
I would love to go to North Korea. Sure. And Iran. We've had plans to go to Iran. We've been pitching a story on Iran since season 1 of Trafficked, and so far it hasn't worked out for us.
Now might not be the best time to go to Iran.
No, might not. Although possibly would be the best time to go.
Yeah.
This is when we want to be there. Yeah,
that's true. Although getting stuck there now.
It's very dangerous, and particularly as a journalist, and there's all reasons not to go. I was trying to go there with my Portuguese passport, so could fly under the radar.
Right, a little bit, until they realize, because you have to apply for a journalism permit to film, and they're going to at least Google you, and then it doesn't matter what color your passport is at that point, I guess. Yeah. Have you ever had to scrap anything because the footage didn't work out, or it got lost, or your camera got stolen, or something?
Not like that, but we had a story we were going to do once about uranium and nuclear weapons, and sort of the trafficking of nuclear weapons and uranium, and we were going to Ukraine. This was way before the war. It was, again, I think it was season 1 of Trafficked. So this was 2019. And then we got word that it was really dangerous. And I can't share many details, but we got word that there was, even though our producer and director was already on the ground, and they called us and was like, do not come. We have to get out of the country. There's shit happening. And so we never did that story, and that's one that I'm sad because we were really looking forward to doing that story.
That was before the war, so the shit happening was what, organized crime or something, or you can't even say what it was?
It was a mix of, I think it was kind of a mix of paranoia, to be frank, and the government talking to people about that we would get in trouble if we did it, and then the people that were going to take us in to give us some of this access deciding they didn't want to do it. So it was a combination of things.
I see. Yeah. Well, I was going to ask what to expect next season, but we covered why that's not happening. So what other shows are you working on, or what other documentaries are you working on?
So I'm working on The Hidden Third, the podcast.
Yep.
You You can catch it on YouTube.
We'll link to it in the show notes. Pay those bills.
Yes.
Exactly. Pay those bills.
I need some of your viewers, Jordan, or listeners, or both. And then I'm also working on a really fun show. I can't tell a lot about it, but it's a really fun show for NatGeo about scams.
Okay.
I can tell you a little bit about it.
Yeah.
It's essentially the idea. It's called Super Scam Me, and it's a show I pitched them, which is I've reported on scams extensively. I've been all around the world talking to scam victims, but I've never felt what it's like to be a scam victim myself. So for a limited period of time, I say yes to every single scam that comes my way. I answer every phone call, I reply to every email. I create this persona that I put out online, and I open myself up to romance dating, romance scams, crypto, all the scams you can think of.
So right now you
it's an
have
experiment.
dudes from Bangladesh messaging you and telling you how beautiful you are or whatever. Just you should invest in their secret crypto platform that's made them 100% return.
You have no idea.
That's
I am
so funny.
talking to 3 Brad Pitts, a couple of Keanu Reeves, I think 4 George Clooney's.
Wow.
Because celebrity scams are huge right now. I'm romantically involved with a couple of men. I have all these amazing scams happening right now.
That's really...
It's a
funny
fun
when
project.
It's funny when you are a willing participant and knowing it's a scam.
Yeah.
You ever send? So we covered those pig butchering scams and scam centers and things. Also, you covered in Trafficked. And one of the things that I was wondering about is, what if I just started talking to these people knowing it was a scam? Because before I used to berate them in Chinese and be like, I'm a Chinese party official. And they'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, we'll take you off of our list. And then when I found out they were being held there captive and they weren't willingly doing it a lot of the time, I started messaging back and being like, hey, are you okay? And they're like, oh, what do you mean? And I'm like, are you in a Cambodian or Burmese scam center and you can't escape? And some of them will reply and go, yes. And it's like, is there anything I could do to help you? Thinking they're going to go, yeah, just deposit crypto. And they're like, can you tell someone that I'm here?
Yeah,
and I've had people send me like their family's phone number and they're like, I'm deleting this account, but just please tell me you did that.
Oh my God, that's so sad.
There's a guy in Dubai told me, he reached out to me because he heard the podcast or saw the podcast on YouTube that I did covering this. And he said, I'm trapped in Dubai, in the UAE. And he drew a map of the scam center and he called me and we recorded the calls and everything. And I called a prosecutor in Santa Clara who covers a lot of crypto scams.
Oh, yeah.
Aaron West.
Aaron West. I love Aaron.
Yeah.
We worked with her for this story,
So she said, there's no evidence that this is happening in Dubai. This is a couple of years ago.
Right.
And then about last year, she called me back and she goes,
I was wrong.
So you're right. There is a huge organized crime connection. There's a Chinese gang working there. We think that the guy you talked to may be a part of this thing.
Yeah.
So he ended up escaping and like deleting all of his media.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that happened. So a lot of we interviewed a lot of victims from these scam compounds who had just been able to flee the scam compounds and were in Thailand on our story, Scam City. And some of the Indians that had just fled the scam compounds went through Dubai. They applied for a job in Dubai. They got to Dubai and they met a woman who lured them for a job in Myanmar. And then they got stuck in these compounds. And these kids were beat and tortured with electric shocks. It was the whole thing.
That's what this guy told me.
This is real. Yeah.
He told me that. And I thought, oh, is this real? Right? Someone's winding me up.
Right.
But it all got corroborated. I mean, not his particular stories, but it was all like, they're getting shocked with batons. And then he sent me all of the personnel with all the photos of everybody who worked there. And I ended up giving it to the FBI. Wow. So I have all these guys from Sierra Leone who work for the security. And he's like, this is the chief enforcer. This is the guy who beats us. This is the boss. Here's a photo of the boss. Here's his nickname in Chinese. I don't know his real name. And so the FBI was like going through all these files. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, interesting. Like, this totally makes sense.
Did you meet with the FBI?
Yeah, they came to my house. Wow. My wife was thrilled about that. She's like, what are you doing? Because I'm like, oh, they want the information.
They were actually interested in knowing?
They were interested.
So do you think they were investigating this? Because no one has done anything.
What they were mostly interested in was that this same guy said there were scams, and they didn't seem to care about that. The guy, an FBI agent in Tennessee, cared about it because it was his beat or whatever. But what really got their attention was this guy on the recorded call had said they meet with Russians all the time, and they talk about they have an insider at a U.S. bank, and they're going to do some kind of thing at the U.S. bank and steal all the money and the personal data. Wow. And then the FBI came over like that night.
Oh, wow.
Because they were like, we want to know if there's going to be a terrorist attack on a bank in the United States. Whoa. They were really interested in that. So I asked that guy for more information about that, and he told me who the Russians were and how they changed all of the IP addresses. He just knew who they were. He didn't have their full names or anything. But then he also had there's a company that comes in and installs VPNs so that they can change their IP addresses every week. So he gave off all of the vendor information, and I think the FBI was like kind of thinking, and I'm speculating here. I think they were thinking, if we can find out who that VPN company is, we can monitor that VPN company and find out which bank it is and what they're going to do, which is probably a good way to investigate.
I should have talked to you. When was this all going down?
It was like last year.
Yeah. When we filmed 2 summers ago. But all of this would have been good information for us, even for our story. Yeah.
Next time.
Yeah, next time.
Yeah.
I need you as my source.
That's right. I would happily join the Van Zeller crew.
That's right.
Thanks for coming in. This has been super fascinating. I'm glad we finally got a chance to do it. I think season 1 I emailed you, and then 5 years happened, and now we're doing it, and it's over.
And it wasn't my fault.
No, it was actually my fault. Yeah. It was cancel, couldn't do it, you were out of the country, I was out of the country,
Right. Yeah.
season was over, too early for the next season.
Right. That's right.
Finally caught it.
Yeah. Now when Trafficked is done,
now it's over.
Here I go.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to catch the next one, whatever that might be. Thank you very much.
Oh, I had such a fun time. Thanks
Likewise.
for having me, Jordan.
What's going through your head at this point? Like, I'm going to get killed?
I'm dead, yeah. I'm like, this is over. I'm done. He goes, dude, I can make you rich. How would you like to make $1 million a day?
What if someone doesn't pay, though?
I said, what do I need to do? He says, you willing to do it illegally? I said, absolutely.
So this moron loses all your money. The good times sounded really awesome, but this part does not sound like it was worth it at all.